So thanks very much, Monica. And it's absolutely, as Monica said, it's very emotional to be standing here with your community, everybody together in the one place. So it's absolutely fabulous to be here. I want to open by paying tribute to the organising committee. They had a vision for this conference, and it took a while to get here, but that vision saw us the whole way through. So incredible amount of work through very difficult circumstances over the last few years. So an absolute tribute to the organising committee. Thank you all. I'd also like to acknowledge the work and the resilience of the library community over the last 2 years. I have never been so proud to be a part of this community. What everybody has worked and delivered and cared about over the incredible difficulties and challenges of COVID-19. It's an absolute acknowledgement of this community and the importance of our work. So I stand here as chair of Conul, which is the consortium of the university and the national and university libraries, the research libraries. Conul is an all-island organisation, and it's one of the few organisations that really have that remit across the Republic and the north of Ireland. So a special welcome to our Northern Irish colleagues here today as well, and on our organising committee. One of the big achievements of Conul is our strategy, which we operate under at the moment. That strategy runs for the term 2020 to 2022. And when we launched our strategy in 2020, we didn't foresee how the world would change over the following years. The 5 pillars of our strategy are open scholarship, policy, teaching and learning, accessibility, and responsible use and preservation. And now, as we stand in nearly the middle of 2022, we're going to carry out a self-reflective exercise to ask, have we delivered all we can for that strategy? Is there more to do under those pillars? And are there themes or priorities that emerged over the last 2 years that we should incorporate into our future work? And that reflective piece will begin in the coming months, carry out in the coming months, begin shortly with the chairs of the Conul groups. And it's a very consultative process, and we're really keen to hear your views. The other really important, there's many, but as I stand here, it's really to acknowledge the importance of the Conul conference. This is really a fabulous, unique opportunity to exchange knowledge and experience across our sector, and really, really delighted that we can do it in person this year. Okay, so my big job in this moment is to introduce our keynote speaker. So we really have a star here this morning. So to introduce Chris Bourg, if she needs introduction, she is the Director of Libraries at MIT. She oversees MIT Press. She's the founding director of the Centre for Research on Equitable and Open Scholarship. Before MIT, she worked for 12 years in Stanford University Libraries, and I was really thrilled to learn last night her PhD is in sociology. I'm super excited to hear what she has to say. I really feel she has a vision for our sector, but also a really clear understanding of what it takes to get there. So let me stand aside now and hand the floor to Chris Bourg. Thank you so
much. Thank you so much. So thank you. I am really, really excited to be here, finally. It's been a while. Thank you so much to the organizing committee, and thank you for waiting until it was a little safer for us to travel and be together like this. It is such a privilege to be able to speak with you, to share with you my thoughts, my vision on the future of libraries, and to share with you some of what we're doing at MIT to try and reimagine what a research library can be, and should do in this sort of almost post-COVID kind of world in a computational age, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So let me start with a little bit of kind of meta stuff. First, let me just humbly admit that this is my first time talking in front of real people in 3 years. much less giving a keynote. So, and I suspect for many of you, it's your first in-person conference. I see some heads nodding. Please feel free to nod your heads, to be expressive. That's, if we're going to be in person, let's make the most of it. Thank you. All right, you're my face back there. You're laughing, so I'm keying on you. Anyway, I'm going to ask a favor of everyone. Can we just temper our expectations a little bit? We're all a little rusty at this in-person thing, so let's temper our expectations accordingly. And speaking of expectations, I do always love any opportunity to talk about the future of libraries, to offer some of my experiences, my observations, some speculations. And I'm pretty passionate about what we're doing at MIT. And I don't have all the answers. I really don't. When I get to speak to people about this, my hope is that it really is a conversation. And I expect to learn as much from you. If you learn anything from me, that's a bonus. So hopefully what I say will just be the start of a conversation, both this morning and for the rest of the conference. So I thought that what I would do in this talk, just to give you a sense of where I'm going, I'll give you a little bit of a context of MIT and the MIT libraries. I'll talk a little bit about what I refer to now as our old future, and by which I mean what we thought was the right vision for the future before the disruptions of the pandemic. Then I'll talk a little bit about the new future, a little bit about what we've done to try and sort of dip our toe into that new future, and then some speculative provocations. So quickly, a little bit about MIT. I love this first bit. In all the rankings, we're usually ranked, it's a very elite university. I recognize we're coming from that perspective. I'm coming from that perspective. We're recognized in all the world rankings as the top university in the world, but somehow nationally we fall behind our neighbor up the river and are tied for second, with Harvard coming in first. We're actually, compared to those peers of, MIT considers Harvard, Yale, and Princeton and Stanford as our peer universities, and compared to those, we're actually relatively small. I don't know how that compares to some of your universities. We've got about 1,000 faculty, about 4,000 undergrads. Believe it or not, almost 50% of whom are women at a school that is primarily an engineering school. The graduate students far outnumber the undergraduate students. And we only have 5 schools. So we have engineering is the biggest. We have humanities, arts and social sciences, management, architecture and planning, sciences, and new College of Computing. And just, the facts are important, but the culture is just as important. So MIT is very much has a very much hands-on approach to learning and research, and that's reflected in the motto, which is mens et manus, mind in hand. So all about learning by doing and making things and solving real-world problems and doing things. Also, it is very much an engineering and computer science school. That is where the center of mass is. Again, we have a strong architecture school, strong management school, but the center of mass is truly engineering and computer science. A couple of other things. Openness is a very important sort of value at MIT. It's a value enacted in many ways. Pre-COVID, we were one of the only private urban universities in the US that had an open campus, which included the libraries, open to all visitors all the time. That's not the case now. We hope to get back to that stance soon. But open also in the sense that MIT's been committed for many, many years, decades really, of sharing the fruits of our teaching and research openly with the world. So our, courses are online, and much of the research that our faculty produce is openly available. There's also an ethos at MIT that we do what we do to try and make the world a better place. And we also have this sort of relentless focus on innovation and on the future. And my personal favorite list of the things that were invented or discovered at MIT is we take credit for inventing the internet. Faculty at MIT were partially a part of the group that detected and discovered gravitational waves. And then my personal favorite is that the video game Guitar Hero was invented at MIT. So I give you all of that because to my mind, MIT is the perfect place to develop a bold and ambitious vision for the future of research libraries. And I came to MIT in 2015 after many years working at the Stanford libraries. And I could see right away that this was a place that was really ready to think about libraries as more than books and buildings. Of course, so let me talk about the MIT libraries. We do have books and buildings. We have 5 libraries on campus and a reading room for distinctive collections, which is our term for our special collections. We have 170 staff lines. We're not full right now. We're suffering from the same sort of great resignation or whatever you want to call it that many other organizations are. So we're at about 155, 160 staff now. And that, again, I have no idea how that size compares to your particular library, but compared to the libraries that MIT considers their peers, we're actually about 3 or 4 times smaller. So MIT as a university is ranked #1 in the only rankings of research libraries in the US, which is a ranking that consists of some formula that combines budget and collection size. MIT Libraries ranks about number 50. So we consider ourselves as small but mighty. The sports metaphor we use, we punch well above our weight for sports fans out there. Okay. I don't know why I keep turning around. It's right there. Again, rusty at this. I hope that info about MIT and the MIT libraries provides some context for how we arrived at what, again, I consider our old vision for the future. So shortly after I arrived at MIT in 2015, the provost asked me to convene a conversation, lead a series of conversations on campus about what the future of research libraries should be at a research university at a place like MIT. So we did what we all do in academia, at least in the US. I assume it's the same here. We formed a task force committee. But this committee, I co-chaired this committee with a faculty member in computer science. And we brought together faculty from all across MIT. So we had engineers, computer scientists, humanists, historians, management faculty, biologists, also staff from the libraries and from the press and from information from the central IT. And it was this range of folks on this task force, from people who relied very heavily on the library's staff and collections in all of their research and teaching on sort of a daily basis. We're in the libraries and consulting with the librarians and archivists and other staff, to faculty who showed up at the first committee meeting and said, the task force meeting, and said, "Not sure why I'm here. I never use the library." Of course, we all know they use the library all the time. They just didn't know it was the library. So we had this whole range of perspectives. And what I asked the group to do was to approach the task before us of having this conversation about what a research library should be in a digital age, in a computational age. I asked them to approach it not from the perspective that many faculty and students approach these things, which is, how can the library better serve me and my interest right now? Which is a totally valid question, totally valid feedback, but I asked them to approach it as a research question. You know, think about this as a research problem to be solved. Again, I tried to tap into the MIT ethos of, how can we have a library that contributes to making the world a better place, contributes to the openness of MIT, contributes to the innovation. And the report from this group is online. If you just Google, I think I have it on the link on one of my slides, but Google Future of Libraries MIT and you'll find it. Your librarians, you can find anything. It's online, but let me share with you some of the sort of high-level sense of the discussions and the outcomes. So the first theme was that although the first revolution in libraries was not yet complete, the team still wanted to talk about that whole shift from that whole print to digital, right? We talked about that as sort of this, again, the first evolution of libraries. And that was the one, what I call the digital turn, where we went from libraries being places that individuals would come to find a book or a manuscript or a video or an image, something physical, and read that, work with it themselves individually. And we went from that to libraries almost as a service where people would access and find digital content online to be read on their own devices, right? And that was the first turn in libraries, the first revolution, not huge shift, and we're all still adjusting to it, of course. And it's not complete. And it also didn't really open up access to the scholarly content the way I think many of us hoped it would, right? It's not complete and it's not as open as we had hoped, but nonetheless, the digital turn did sort of make research and reading arguably more efficient for those who had access. But it's this next evolution of libraries that the task force spent a lot of time talking about. And they emphasized that this was not just a technological shift, but that it was important to also accompany this shift, combine this with a renewed commitment to open science and open scholarship. And the next shift is this evolution of libraries, first from a place to a service, and then from a service to a platform, right? And you notice that those are all cumulative. We don't abandon the physical when we move to digital, and we don't abandon digital and services when we move to thinking about a platform. And also that this moves us along several continuums, from scarcity to abundance, we hope, from restricted access to more open access, and from a static collection to something that's much more dynamic. So the task force described this by calling for the libraries to operate as an open global platform. A platform is something that scholars and patrons can build on. It's a way of thinking about libraries as not just warehouses of books or repositories of digital content, but as vehicles for interacting with content and tools and expertise, both to consume information and knowledge and to create new knowledge and share it and disseminate it with the world in many forms, right? From text to images, data, maps, text, multimedia, interactive, really dynamic. And for it to be truly effective for current and future patrons, it must be open and it must serve a global community. And one of the key features of the Library of the Future, according to this task force at MIT, the library in a computational age, is that it should be a library accessible by machines and algorithms, not just by people. In a computational age, we have to think about machines and algorithms as almost a new kind of patron, right? A patron that doesn't replace the human patrons who will still use our services and our expertise and our content, but as a patron that has different needs and might require a different set of skills and a different way of thinking about how our resources are organized and could be used. So this, as bold as it maybe sounds, I don't know, is what I now consider our old future, right? We thought it was pretty bold at the time, maybe too bold, frankly, but we were happy at MIT to think of that as an aspiration, right? This open, interactive, computational platform as what the library was aspiring to be. And then, of course, the world changed. And you all, I'm repeating things we all know. COVID disrupted almost everything. There's plenty to say about the tragedies that COVID wrought on all of our communities. But here I just want to speak very practically about how the response to COVID impacted us at MIT and MIT libraries, and I wonder if that will resonate with you all. Obviously, teaching, learning, research, and everything else our work went suddenly remote. And then for us, and maybe some of you, soon thereafter, the financial impacts of COVID hit. And for us, that meant mandatory permanent budget cuts. I'm going to look, this is the time when I'm going to stop and say, any head nods out there? Do you all face any of the same things? Nobody's nodding your head. You all didn't face budget cuts. Well, good for you. That's awesome. Okay. Well, we did, and many of our peers across the U.S. did, some much more severe than ours. So at MIT, that meant that me and my leadership team had to, early in the pandemic, we realized we were having to make choices about what services and resources we could prioritize in this sort of new, almost entirely remote environment, and frankly, what we might have to cut to be able to do that and to meet these new budget realities. So my leadership team and I fairly quickly realized that actually the old vision was fine. We needed not so much a new vision or a new direction. The old vision was still pretty compelling. We just needed to be able to communicate it more clearly, more practically, more urgently. And the idea of the library as a fully open and equitably accessible platform seemed like just the right vision at this moment in time, in light of the disruptions and the new suddenly remote posture. And that realization was the impetus for a document that we now refer to as our new urgency document, our new urgency vision at MIT. And basically what we did is we boiled down all the themes in what was a 50-page Future of Libraries Task Force report into a one-page set of really pithy principles that people could hang on to and that could be used to guide both strategic and tactical decisions. And so, when everyone is remote, and for us, many students and faculty were stuck out of the country, in some cases out of state and out of the country, it really forced the issue of ensuring that the library remained open, and by that we meant open digitally and remotely and accessible to everyone wherever they were. And so these are the principles that we operate under now. This is our new vision boiled down to 6 pithy principles. The first principle of our new vision for the future is that we commit to being a digital-first library. Unapologetically commit to being a digital-first library, and we commit to expediting efforts to maximize digital access to content and services. And that goes hand in hand with the second one, which is we'll prioritize an open scholarship agenda to accelerate the progress of science, promote equity and inclusion across disciplines, and try to reduce the marginalization of scholars and scholarship from disadvantaged communities. We also committed to investing in staff, services, and tools to support data-intensive and computational research and learning. We committed, and this is where it goes with the digital first. It's digital first, but with an essential core of physical collections and services and spaces, but only those that are whose value can't be meaningfully replicated in a digital or online space. We also commit to an environment that advances equity and inclusion and diversity and accessibility. And because we're MIT, we thought, let's try and do this in a way that allows us to be bold in our leadership and perhaps serve as a model for research libraries in an unpredictable future. So we articulated our vision with these 6 principles and did so in a way that we tried to highlight to our staff and to others and to the Institute the new urgency that was thrust on us by the pandemic. And in doing so, again, we've given our staff some sort of really simple and clear guidelines for understanding how their work fits into that vision and our direction. And it turned out that these principles were simple and clear enough that they served as both sort of strategic beacons, a compass, if you will, for us in planning, but also as principles that helped staff make day-to-day decisions in a tactical way. You know, if you say it's digital, if you have to make a decision about what to buy, digital first is the default. Does it meet the essential core of can't be replicated? Nope, then go digital, right? So it's very, very clear kind of guidance. I'm going to talk about what we've done to try and operationalize these principles, some early forays into this newly urgent future. I'm going to concentrate on those first three principles mostly. So first, probably important to acknowledge that we're already digital first. We're digital first. So if you look at this, this graph, sort of three buckets of content. The first is digital content that we make openly available. The second is digital content that we've licensed and therefore mostly have to restrict to MIT only. And then the third is our tangible physical collections. And it's such a nice graphic illustration of how the use of our digital content dwarfs the use of our physical content. It already did in 2018. And more importantly, if you look at the first chart, that's our open content. The digital plus open is way more heavily used, especially relative to the size of that collection. And that's been the case. We were already digital first. Important here to note that digital first does not mean digital only. That is a comment that came up quite a bit. We all know that some content will only be available in tangible format. But frankly, the last 2+ years of nearly total remote teaching and learning does make me wonder if a future for libraries is one where all things print are considered special. Digital is our real collection, is our general collection, and if it's in print, it better be special. I was told to be provocative. So, in terms of how MIT Libraries has operationalized digital first over the last 2+ years, the first thing we did was convert to digital thesis deposit. You may ask, what? You hadn't done that already? But it's amazing how a crisis like COVID-19 can cut through bureaucracy and decentralization in ways that all of our advocacy of trying to go to digital thesis deposit over almost a decade had not accomplished. So we were able to do that. The rest of our stats are really kind of staggering to me as I look at them. We doubled our ebook purchases, literally making digital first the way we purchase new books whenever possible. Our journal content was, of course, already very much digital. And then with no physical access to our archives and our special collections, our distinctive collections, we saw an explosion in requests for digitization of that content. I mean, more than 800% increase. And we actually got very creative and popped a tent, that's what the news article said, in one of our iconic reading rooms on campus that was now mostly empty. And so now with more people and more resources fully devoted to digitizing our collections, we were able to, again, increase our output 800% for those requests. All right, how am I doing on time? I'm gonna hurry up here. So as I said, we were already a heavily digital library, but the shift to unapologetically digital first was really not just because we like digital. Why digital? Because digital enables open, equitable, and computational access to collections. Sorry about that. So in operationalizing I'm going to move on now to the open and equitable scholarship part of our new urgency. Our primary focus on that was developing something we call the MIT Framework for Publisher Contracts. And it's, again, a set of principles that emphasize author rights and open access and sustainable and transparent pricing. And over the course of the last 2 years, since we published that framework and have started using it as the basis for negotiations, we've signed more than 10 contracts with everything from small society publishers to large commercial publishers. We do rather famously have one notable impasse. Elsevier was unable to offer us a framework-aligned contract, and we have been out of contract with Elsevier for over 2 years now, or coming on 2 years now. We can talk about that if you want. Sandra also mentioned that I am the founding director of something called the Center for Research on Equitable and Open Scholarship. That's a research center based in the libraries that we launched soon after the Future of Libraries Task Force report. And in this past year, we were able to hire 3 postdocs on a grant from the Mellon Foundation, and each of those postdocs is working on doing research on some aspect of open and equitable scholarship, whether it's the incentives for how to get scholars to behave and to engage in open scholarship behaviors, or understanding the impact of citation bias and the impact of open or closed scholarship, et cetera. So that's been one of the things that I'm most proud of, is launching that center. We can talk about that more if you'd like. In terms of our data and computational future, and MIT's mascot is a beaver, which is nature's engineer, and his name is Tim, which is MIT backwards. We're very clever. So that's the beaver. And our initial foray into data and computational future included insisting on text and data mining rights as part of the principles of that MIT framework when we negotiated with publishers for contracts. We also are engaging in a pilot to create a research data index, which is an index to data created at MIT by MIT researchers that is openly available. And it's just an index. We're not trying to store all the data. That is a scale that we are not ready to step into yet. But we're trying to do what libraries do best, provide an index for where you can find things. And then TimDex is a discovery API into our catalog records and our archival records so that anyone can write a program or write some code to do interesting things on and with the library's collections. And it's an open API. So in addition to what we're doing, I do talk a lot about libraries in a computational future and an AI future. And I like to think about the 4 different ways that libraries can play a role here and should absolutely play a role and bring our expertise to the front there. So we all know, we've read about and know that there are immense problems with bias and ethical issues in AI. And who better than librarians who understand all of the pitfalls in how information is organized and collected and described, and how prejudices can creep in, how absence of information can create bias. Who better to help explain and mitigate that and imagine mitigation strategies than librarians? So I think that's a role that we can play in terms of education. I also think we can do what libraries have always done with all kinds of resources and be a centralized, accessible, and inclusive resource for our communities, providing sort of literature on how to learn about AI and machine learning, but also there are places in the US, possibly here, that are providing hardware and software and AI labs in the library for students who maybe don't have access to start playing around with machine learning elsewhere. We can provide repositories of training data, et cetera. Data and collections. But I think probably another way that we can start to think about libraries in a computational future and an AI future is to think about how would we leverage machine learning in our own work. All right, my red light just went off, so I'm going to move as quickly as I can here. I do? Excellent. Okay, cool. All right, so now we're getting to the fun stuff, some speculative, some futures and possibly speculative. So two interesting examples, I think, of AI in our own work come from the MIT Press. So the first is something called Rapid Reviews COVID-19. This is an open publication that publishes peer reviews, rapid peer reviews of it was launched sort of early in the pandemic, and they publish rapid open peer reviews of preprints related to COVID-19 research. And the AI future here is that they're using a natural language processing AI tool to basically power search preprint servers to find articles to review. And then there is the human labor of doing a quick and rapid review for credibility, basically, and rigor. Is this a credible claim that this preprint makes? And then publishing those reviews. And so this was, this was an urgently important topic, lots of research coming out, and it's really critical that we knew we could sift the wheat from the chaff, if you will, and find out what was credible. And so this was a really using AI to find the right research that was being posted on these preprint servers and then find reviewers to post open reviews of them so that we would know what was credible or not was a really important, I think, intervention. Also from the MIT Press, my colleagues there are experimenting with AI-generated audio content of journal articles. Right now they're only doing abstracts at a fraction of the cost and time that it takes to create audio, human-generated audio. And so I love to think about the implications of new ways of making content accessible and mobile. Right? Imagine being able, scholars who all of our scholars like to keep on top of current research in their field. They often do that by reading through lots of abstracts. Imagine being able to listen to those abstracts instead. That might be an accessible and more efficient way of accessing that content for some of our users. I'll talk about journals as a service in Q&A if you want, because I want to get to this. So I call this Back to the Future. It's nearly 30 years ago, an brilliant MIT designer named Muriel Cooper, who actually designed, if you're familiar with it, the quite iconic MIT Press logo. But she was really brilliant, way ahead of her time. And in 1994, she gave what was an early version of a TED Talk, if you will. And she described her prototype of what she called an information landscape. It was a kind of 3D information space full of advanced user-controlled data visualizations, multiple ways of linking and organizing content. Basically, she was imagining and trying to prototype a virtual reality version of a library, sort of before virtual reality was really a reality for us. That was a lot of reality in one sentence. Again, rusty. But even now, when we do have the technology to create sort of fully immersive experiences and possibly a fully immersive information discovery environment, so far, any attempts at that, even things like and other kinds of data visualization ways of searching, are really stymied by paywalls and lack of robust, abundant access to open digital collections, and I think by our own imaginations. But please, please don't mistake my enthusiasm for this fully digital, open, computational future for libraries as techno-utopianism or a lack of understanding or interest or love for the physical experiences and the physical value of libraries and the physical importance of in-person learning, teaching, these sorts of experiences. I absolutely believe tangible things matter. Learning and creating and discovering can be powerfully embodied experiences. And that's part of why I'm so excited to think about a real future, a sci-fi kind of, the longer future that we haven't invented yet, about sort of exciting new library experiences that actually combine digital and physical and create maybe a version of that information, that 3D information landscape that combines the affordances of open digital content with the very real and important haptic experience of being in libraries and doing things physically. But that kind of, if we're going to get there, if we're going to be able to create a new immersive kind of library experience that could be so much more inclusive than a library building full of some books, because no library building has all of the content, right? If we're going to create an immersive experience that really does have, allow people to explore as much as possible of our collective human cultural history and knowledge, we have to, in libraries now, do the legwork to make our content open, to make it digital first, because that enables open, and also to make it so that it is accessible by algorithms and can be manipulated. Okay, and no one library can do that alone. Open digital content can and has to be networked for it to really be useful. We have to work together on that. And when we do that, it becomes this massive library of content that we have to rely on machine learning and algorithms to help us make sense of it. From where I sit at MIT, with our focus on solving big challenges, making the world a better place, I do think our students and our scholars and the world needs us to work towards a digital, open, accessible, and computational library of the future, as the organizing committee so eloquently said, that is now. Okay. So, those of you who see me on Twitter know this is Daily Jiffy. And I just want to say, I'm closing up now, I'm not really one of those speakers who minds a comment in the form, a question that's really more of a comment. I really don't mind that, because I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your reactions to anything I've said, to the things that I didn't say and didn't talk about. For example, I didn't really talk about the skills and expertise that our staff might require in the future. I also didn't really talk too much about the library as community space and how important that is, so we can talk about that. And just to be clear, I'm not at all suggesting that digitization and AI tools will replace that human element of libraries, quite the contrary. I really hope that digital, open, computational ways of delivering and organizing content will free up the time and expertise and energy of those of us who work in libraries to do what we do best, and that's connect with our patrons, engage in human interactions that enable learning and connection and growth and understanding. So I'd love to hear from you on any of these topics. Anything else you want to talk about that may have sparked some ideas. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Chris. That was really, really interesting. I have so many thoughts. I want to open the floor. I want to thank you as well for speaking so openly and sharing this experience, because it is really helpful to understand it like this. Thanks, Chris. So